The creator is set in the 2070s after a nuclear attack has ignited a war between the Western world and artificial intelligence. Director Gareth Edwards spent much of the last decade playing with established franchises, so we're excited to see him return with his own breed of science fiction. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a movie. It's that simple. And this is one that slipped through the cracks last year. This was in the transition from Tara to David, where we didn't have time to slot in like a new movie, and then we had franchises to do to catch up on early in the year. But it's finally time today to talk about The Creator, which was Gareth Edwards' new movie that came out last year. And we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you warning before we get into spoilers. But just to remind you before we get started, if you're enjoying the show, hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch. And of course, you can get bonus shows from me and David on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about them at the end of the show. The Creator is set in the future. It is a cyberpunk-esque dystopian future movie. Where there's AI life, there is robots going around willy-nilly, and a whole bunch of other things going on, which we'll get into, of course. But it's all about this war between North America and New Asia. I don't think they ever... I'm sure there's some lore written on the internet somewhere about exactly what comprises of New Asia, but they never get too specific in the movie. But
there's one point where they show like a holographic map that like lights up, and they show it's pretty much just all of Southeast Asia and like Indonesia and stuff like that, but they don't get specific with it.
I'm sure if you pause that and compare it to a map, you could sit and work out exactly every country that's part of it. But they set that up over the course of the movie, so there is a lot to spoil in this actually, because it definitely takes a lot of not like harsh turns, but there's definitely a lot that it does as it moves through its story. So
this movie has chapters in it. They have specific little like things that pop up, and it seems like there's always a twist before a chapter each time.
Yeah, kind of. So we'll get into it. So it's very much a sort of hard science fiction story about the future. And it's talking about AI and the fear of AI, which, while it's not obviously the exact same type of AI that we're talking about in present day, it does feel oddly timely to have a film about the future of AI when we're having all the discussions we are now about it. So that is pretty interesting. Going into this, because I did want to see this when it came out, and I kind of left it. I was thinking, I'll see it for the show when it's time. And then I kind of regretted that, because I was like, it's going to be like, I think at this point, this is like 8 months old or something like that. Like, I kind of wish I'd just seen it in the movies, in the theater when it was out. But hey, we're here now. So... because I really like Gareth Edwards as a director here. I love his Godzilla movie from 2014. I know that's a divisive one. Some people are feel very differently on it, but for all its faults, I think it's a stunning looking movie that really captures the awe and almost like... it's almost Lovecraftian how like big those monsters feel in that movie and how in awe you are of them. And I really love that vibe. And I really like the movie he did before that, his low-budget film called Monsters, which was, him doing, like, he did all the special effects for that on his laptop. Like that's how, like, wow. And we've not done that on Ace yet, so that's one that I'm looking forward to doing at some point.
Yeah, and then obviously the thing that the marketing for this movie pushed the hardest was that he was the director of Rogue One, which, obviously, if you like or hate Star Wars, so be it. But I think it's pretty commonly accepted that Rogue One is the best thing that Disney has done with Star Wars in terms of theatrical films, at the very least.
Yeah, but it's only Gareth Edwards' movie I don't like, so like
fair enough.
So I was excited to see him get back to something of his own and see what he can do with a different premise. So because even the direction of Rogue One, and we'll get to Rogue One obviously when we get there, but even the direction of that I thought felt very like overly choppy, like it had been edited to hell and back in post-production. So I was very fascinated by this. One of the first surprises I had was the aspect ratio. This film is 2.761. That is wider than most movies that come out. So on a regular 16:9 TV, you're getting really thick black bars at the top and bottom. I don't know if you noticed this, David.
I did. I did notice that it definitely felt more widescreen than not. But it again, For me, as soon as I get into the movie, the aspect ratio is just a part of it. I don't really notice it unless it's drawing attention to it.
I mean, sure, obviously, but it's the sort of thing where it's such an irregular ratio. I actually just double checked that I wasn't watching some weird, like, is this what it's meant to look like? Is this correct?
Somehow the IMAX version got leaked instead.
Well, this is the thing. The opening logo, was it Fox? Whatever the opening studio logo was.
Yeah, it was fine. Well, I mean, 20th Century Studios, but yes,
well,
Fox.
same difference. Yeah. I'll still call it Fox, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Like, they clearly didn't have a version of that intro this wide, so it's actually the 2.35:1 version cropped, so it looked cut off at the top and bottom, and I thought, oh, what have they done here? But I think it's just because they didn't have that logo in that size, because they don't make movies that ratio that often. So
yeah, probably.
I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. So clearly he's going for a cinematic thing here. It's very wide. It's very Vista filled and all that.
Oh yeah, I think that's. I mean, without just getting too much into it, I think that one of the things this movie does the best is visual just splendor. It's like almost every frame in this is just beautiful to look at, regardless of what's actually going on in it.
Yeah, and this is a relatively speaking low budget movie, and you know when I say relatively, like, you know, well, it's things have changed a lot over the years, you know, like the what was once medium budget is now a ton. So 80 million does sound like a lot, but it's actually not these days for movies. And for a movie like this that's full of visual effects pretty constantly, for it to look as good as it does is quite a feat. And it kind of harkens back to Gareth Edwards' earlier career, because his movie Monsters, which I don't even think cost $1 million, had pretty decent effects. You know, so he's clearly very good at getting that out of like the teams that he works with or whatever. I mean, I don't know how they achieved this.
I mean, just to put it into perspective real quick, I went over to another movie that came out that year, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which is another one that has constant effects and whatnot. That one had a budget of 4 times the size of this movie at $320 million. So
Ant-Man 3 cost over $300 million to make. And I guarantee, I've not seen that one, but I guarantee you it doesn't look as good as this movie does.
No, definitely not.
I'm pretty positive on that. So, yeah, so that's one of the first things that stick out about this, is that it's really stretching its budget to punch above its weight. And in many ways reminds me of not only his earlier films, it makes me think a little bit of something like District 9, just these lower budget sci-fi movies that are really being smart with their money, and, you know, even some of the themes even kind of overlap in some ways. So, yeah, I mean, we'll get into everything, but I guess we'll just start with a simple question. David, what did you think of The Creator?
I liked it. I think that this movie is like you said, using the effects, stretching that out, it really felt super strong in terms of the visual prowess that it was going for there. I think that it does a decent job emotionally of hitting the points that it needs to hit on, but if I had to give a critique, I felt like the beginning setup felt really strong, and when we get to the ending, I feel like it landed the hits that it was trying to, but there was something skipped in the middle, and I'm not sure what exactly it was, but it just felt like all of a sudden, especially I think as we enter the third act, it felt like we jumped ahead in the development of these characters in the story, and we are like missing a big chunk there. So story-wise, I think there's a little bit of an issue with it, but honest to God, like most of all of it was just there are segments where the main character is just giving like a monologue or a dialogue with some other characters, and they just kind of spend some time shooting around the world. They show like how the AIs are interacting with humans and just like landscape shots and stuff like that. And all I could think in those moments is, this is what Zack Snyder was trying to do with Rebel Moon. Like, this is the kind of world building that feels organic. And obviously this is our own world just set 20 minutes in the future sort of thing. But like, it's so effortless the way that you can see the way that just a robot and a human interact with like some other game or something. And you immediately understand how we got to that point. Whereas I never got that with Rebel Moon.
Yeah, I think in the first 10 minutes there's so much world building, setting up the context of the world that we're in, in what's going on. And there's a 5-year time jump after like the opening kind of prologue part. But like even just before we get to that 5-year jump, there's so much already set up. There's so much about this world and like how it develops from where we are now and how AI and robotics becomes a big part of the world. And then a big event, which, I mean, it's not a spoiler to say because it's the opening like set up in the movie. You know, like a nuclear bomb hits Los Angeles and it's believed to be like the AI did this. So AI gets outlawed in the West, but New Asia still wants to make AI and robots, and that's kind of why they're in. It's actually kind of weird to say because there's a really specific bit of footage just made to look like a sort of like a statement from like the government where they're saying we're not at war with New Asia, but we really are at war with New Asia. And so I don't even want to call it a Cold War because they're straight up doing stuff. It feels Cold War doesn't seem strong enough, but they're not officially at war yet either.
It feels like the sort of thing during like the U.S. war on terrorism, where it's like we're not at war with the Middle East, we're just at war with every country that happens to have terrorists in them, which when you know it is like the whole Middle East. Yeah,
actually, that's a really good parallel, actually, because they basically see AI as a weapon of mass destruction, and that's what they're hunting. So that said, though, it's not a perfect parallel because there it was more about the oil and that was just a convenient excuse.
Oh, yeah.
So there's definitely not a one-to-one, but yeah, it's a good parallel in some ways.
I will say that the characters in this, they are at least very ideological. There's no like backstabbing or anything like that in terms of like, oh, you think this was about the robots, but it's actually about the money or something like that. Like, no, they just hate the robots.
Yeah, it's never about anything like that, which is not because it's not what the movies try to talk about, and that's fine. The movies try to talk about humanity and what makes a human, and can the robots be life, and you know, not exactly new ideas for science fiction dealing with these topics, but I'm always a sucker for them when they're done well, and I like the movie too. I think, like, I don't know if I'd agree. It feels like there's a big chunk missing in development. It does feel like it maybe takes a couple of leaps where it should be maybe slower through a couple of bits. And I think it might benefit in rewatches where you just kind of accept this is this point where this jump really happens, and this is this point where this jump happens. But by and large, and I think this is something that all Gareth Edwards movies are guilty of to an extent, but where his strengths lie, this movie like is hitting on all those. Like the spectacle, the feeling of awe, the visual effects, obviously, this vision of the future, which feels fairly grounded. You know, relatively speaking, there's maybe the Nomad itself might be the one thing that feels a bit fantastical, but everything else feels like, you know, so it's, I think it's really strong in that sense. I think it's fairly well paced by and large, other than maybe some emotional leaps for the characters. And I think I like how it handles some moments that are obviously coming based on the premise, but it does interesting little things to make them feel unique and of this movie's own version of those events. Plus, you know, if we get into the cast here, we got John David Washington in the lead role, who, of course, he was the lead man in Tenet. He's popped up in some other things, but that's the other big sci-fi thing I can think of. Gemma Chan's in here. Yeah, and you go.
Which, could I just, the moment that he popped up and we started, like, because obviously there's a prologue bit and then we skip ahead 5 years, I'm just like, oh no, please. I can't handle the timey-wimey nonsense involving this man anymore.
No. He's no timey-wimey in this.
Yeah.
So you've got Gemma Chan, you got Allison Janney, who's kind of like an American kind of colonel who's like calling a lot of shots in the operations, trying to do things in New Asia. And you've got Ken Watanabe, who's like one of the main robots. And of course the other big name, I suppose, I mean not a big name as an actor yet, but the other big main character is Alfie, the child robot that's going to be a prominent character. I won't talk too much about her, I don't think, until spoilers, but we should acknowledge she is there. That's Madeline Una Voiles is the actress for her in particular.
So one thing just lore-wise to clear up is that there are two different breeds of robots, I guess you could say, where there's straight-up AI robots, the ones that look like Chappie sort of thing, and then you've got simulants who are made up to look like humans. They are the ones that... So it's not like Ken Watanabe is giving a voice to a robot. It is Ken Watanabe... And then they give him a couple of like robot figures. They look
like humans, but they're not trying to pass for human either, because like the back of their head still is clearly robotic, but they've got like a human face on the front kind of thing. So yeah, you've got, I guess, just the more drone-esque ones that are like sort of cop drones and things like that, who are just a bit more Chappie-esque. But yeah, I mean, I definitely was feeling some, just from the grittiness of this world, I was getting some Neil Blomkamp feelings.
Oh, yeah.
And which is not a bad thing, because as much as he's not lived up to District 9 since then, like, his movies always look and feel great. Like, as for all the other faults you can throw at them, I always like the feel of the world that we're in when he makes a movie.
Even just in the very intro sequence where we kind of get like here's how AI developed through the time sort of thing. There's a point where they're showing these robots like checking out groceries, and then they're like helping people to their cars and crosswalks and stuff. And then all of a sudden, like, the narration says, and also who can forget them helping with the social services? And then you just see robot cops just like shooting protesters and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, there it is. There's the District 9. Happy to see it.
Yep. So all that stuff I really like. It's if I have a critique about the chaptering that it does, is that it feels like relatively frequently, like every 20 minutes you get a chapter title until about just over halfway, and then the last like hour almost is just one chapter. Like, it just stops happening at a certain point, which it makes sense, because I'm not really sure. Like, I think I can split one other part off and say you could stop here and name this part, right? But I get why thematically that was the last one they brought up.
Yeah, it felt like one of those things where it's like, okay, you know, while we're developing the plot and whatnot, but once you're wrapped up into what eventually becomes the third act, like final action sequence, it would have felt disjointed if they had a title pop up, except for, and it's probably at the same point where you did, there's one spot where it felt like, right here, there definitely should be one right here, but they didn't for whatever reason. Yeah,
it is what it is. So no, and I do think the direction, like, I mean, Edwards, it's funny because I like the feeling of his worlds, and I like how he handles the spectacle. I will say that as far as like scene pacing goes, he is very different to what I typically like, and he does tend to have a lot of cutaways. He does tend to have a lot of like quicker moving scenes, and typically speaking, I would say that I gravitate towards those slower paced scenes that really sort of let everything sink in, whereas he does move through things quite quickly, which is why it still impresses me that he is able to still achieve some feelings out of me, because I can't deny that when I got to the end of the movie, I was invested in what was happening. I was feeling the emotion of the beats that were playing with certain characters. Like well, the journey wasn't perfection. There was some bumps along the way, and it wasn't like a masterclass in like character engagement with the audience. It still got to the point where I'm like, okay, I give a shit. I want so and so to succeed. I want the ending to be what it is, kind of thing. So ultimately, like, I'm on board, and I kind of like that we get a movie like this, which feels like a fairly, I mean, it's obviously a lot of the ideas aren't like super original, but an original IP, you know, it's not like a, I mean, maybe it's based on a book or something, I don't know, but like, it's not some franchise thing. It's not like some big sequel or whatever.
Yeah.
I appreciate that we get that, and we get it from a director who isn't just like every other director, and it feels like, oh, there's some rough edges, but there's rough edges because that's this director's rough edges, and it feels unique because of that. So I really appreciate this existing amongst all the, you know, the bigger names and the bigger like franchise stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that when it comes down to it, what is so enticing about this one is the idea that it doesn't feel like it is franchise setup. It doesn't feel like it is. Like, maybe if whoever, you know, Disney owns the rights to it now with 20th Century Studios or whatever, maybe they could do something else with it. But just looking at this film on its own, it feels very much of a complete story. You get the full extent of it, and if they want to dive back into this world again, so be it. But like, I am fine with just this existing on its own. Yeah, it doesn't need any kind of sequel or anything like that. The story is absolutely complete. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I really want to add. I mean, Hans Zimmer did the score, and it wasn't Hans Zimmer's most standout work. I didn't really notice it as much for the most part as compared to some of his other movies, but it was solid. Like, when it did ramp up and did some emotional beats, it did hit. So yeah, no, I mean, I read something somewhere in the trivia that it was originally they were going to try to, like, obviously modern AI is what it is today, but there was still some pre-existing AI stuff, and they were going to try to train an AI on Hans Zimmer's score and then just like have it produce a Hans Zimmer score to make it feel even more robotic. But then they were like, yeah, let's not. Let's just get Hans Zimmer anyway.
That's so funny. It's so weird, like, because I think that would be critiqued if this movie came out a year later. I think it would be under a lot of shit for daring to do that rather than hiring a composer. Even though thematically, I get why they creatively made that choice potentially to because it mimics the themes of the movie, but it would still probably raise some eyebrows, and they're probably happy in hindsight with the way the conversation's going with AI being used in movies that they did not make that choice.
Well, that's the only other thing that was like somewhat controversial is that apparently when the trailer was first coming out, one of the shots was from the Beirut explosion. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, no, I remember the explosion because it was insane seeing the footage of that explosion. But I remember it being pointed out that like one of the shots in the trailer was basically that with like a sort of like fresh like coat of paint over it to like a city masked over it that was different. And it's not in the final movie because I was looking for it. I had it in my head. And I think there's a moment early on when it was going through some quick shots where I'm like, I bet it would have been in there. If they were going to put it anywhere, it was going to be in there. But it wasn't there.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, again, if they could get in even somewhat hot water off of, oh, you reused like an actual tragedy sort of thing, to have that combined with the idea of, and you didn't get a proper composer, you used AI, this movie would have been like rife with all those clickbait YouTube titles of like, this is the end of cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even remember, like, did they even like put out like an explanation at the time saying, oh, that wasn't meant to be in there, they used that explosion as a template, but it wasn't meant to actually make it into anything? I don't know if they ever said
literally
it like
exactly what you just said. It was a Reddit AMA with Edwards promoting the film, and he was like, exactly that. It was meant for the trailer, and then they were supposed to take that out, but they didn't, so yeah.
I can buy that's true that they use. So hey, here's a really big explosion that really happened. Let's use that as a sort of a reference to build our own, and then they just left it in by accident. Like I could buy that happens. Dumber things have happened in movie making than that for sure. But maybe they just went, oh, we thought we might get away with it, but then, I mean, I don't know. It was a pretty famous explosion. People were going to notice it was the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that, because that's the thing. At a certain point, you have a big explosion, it's going to essentially look the same of like a shockwave regardless. So maybe it was just the sort of thing of, oh, we could study it and like make a similar looking shockwave. But yeah, I think it really comes down to the fact that it was the exact same shot. Like there's no way to get around that. It was the exact like shockwave that was used from the exact same angle. So, oh well.
Yeah. So yeah, wise choice to take that out of the movie. Even if it might never have even technically been in the movie. It was just, a temp thing for the trailer, and then But either way,
I'll my favorite thing to make fun of with trailers in terms of controversies was when oh god, why am I blanking on the name now? The Purge. That was it. When The Purge came out, they used the like emergency broadcast signal sound, and that is a big no-no, like legally a no-no. You don't imitate that sound. And so they had to pull that one pretty quick, all things considered. But yeah, that's the one where like, it's one thing if you get caught stealing a clip or something like that. It's another if you break federal law in your trailer.
Here's the thing though, I didn't know that was illegal, and I buy that whoever put that in did not know that was illegal.
Oh no, I'm sure that like whoever put it in, but at some point it has to pass by the legal department, right? At some point they got to shove it by there and be like, hey, is this good?
I don't know. Do they send trailers to the lawyers? Hey, lawyers, is this good? Like, I don't know if they do. I mean, I buy that they probably watch the final movie and say, hey, there's something in here that's a problem. But the trailer, I don't know. They're just rushing to get it out, I guess. Like,
well, they started doing it now.
Oh yeah, maybe after that they started doing it. That's funny. Yeah. So I guess we're ready for spoilers, I would say. So we can start talking about the movie properly. So spoilers for the creator, you've been warned. We're about to get into it. So the world is set up as robotics has advanced. We get like old-timey footage, effectively, of like, which is really funny because this is still supposed to be post-present day. So why does the footage look like it's from the 50s? But whatever.
as it turns out, Fallout really hit a resurgence of popularity, and everyone was imitating it.
So yeah, but you see, yeah, at least like you said earlier, we see all the robots doing these basic tasks, but then all of a sudden, we see this nuclear bomb hit Los Angeles, and this, we get this serious speech from like the Secretary of Defense or whoever it is that's speaking, and is like, "Oh, we're not at war with Eurasia, but AI has been outlawed in all of the West and North America, and we will. This is not about resources. This is not about whatever. This is about like survival. Like that's how he sells it. This is about survival. We have to stop this." So that sets things up, and I think what I like about when it cuts to the beach and it's where our character Joshua is living with Maya, is that very quickly it sets up this idea that a lot of people have moved around, and there's a lot of Americans just living in like New Asia. That was kind of the vibe I got immediately from this, because well, she's English but he's American, and they're living in New Asia, so it immediately gave this this idea the makeup of the world has changed dramatically by the time we get, because the main part of the story I think is set in 2065, but this would be 5 years before that, so this is about 2060, which maybe I'll live to see, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. No, but I really appreciate it, because as the movie goes on, you get more and more of this idea of a lot of the soldiers here, like, they don't have a major stake in believing the anti-AI like propaganda stuff. So when it all comes time to like end it, when they're done with their service and whatnot, they kind of just sometimes chill around here. Like, they just have found something that they enjoy here, and they just make a life for themselves. And it brings me back to like post-Vietnam, where there were so many Vietnam vets who like brought home a wife from Vietnam and like made a life with them as well. So it's just the history repeating itself sort of aspect to it.
Yeah, and one of the big thematic points, because obviously our main character Joshua is not going to be pro-robot right early on. That's kind of a big part of his character. But we find out quite quickly, well, we find out a bunch of things actually. Again, there's a lot of information really early on. So Maya's pregnant, right? And we get a sweet little moment with them, sort of like joking around about the baby being like him and whatever, right? There's a couple of little jokes. It's all endearing stuff. And then there's like, there's like soldiers coming in from the beach, things are going bad, and things ramp up. And when he's on his own with the soldier they've brought in, like it's Ken Watanabe comes in, and he calls Joshua brother, like that's what he calls him. And he's a robot, of course. When Joshua is left alone with this US soldier, he immediately pretends to kill him, but then says, "What are you doing here? You're going to blow my cover." So we find out he's undercover, but he's also like married and got a kid on the way with a woman who's a part of this like side of the conflict. So it immediately sets up all this stuff, and we get this sense of like the sort of the pickle he's got himself into, right?
Yeah, a little bit of a skirmish, tiny little one here. Something else that's big for the character, I think, but it's underplayed the whole time. Like, they don't draw that much attention to it.
I know what you're going to bring up, because like as soon as he gets up, you see the robotic arm and the robotic leg, and there's something kind of beautiful that he has to rely on robotic limbs, but he's against treating robots as life, even though like a third of his body or whatever the ratio is. Is technically robot.
This entire movie, I think one of the ground themes of it, as you said before, is blurring this line of where does humanity start. It's obviously, you got like a blender, that's not human. You got a human, that is human. But somewhere in the middle, there's a blurry little area of when does a robot become human, or when does a human become more robot. And I think that having our main character be disabled and needing this robotics in order to just function day to day, that's a beautiful shorthand to be able to just start that theme off immediately and then keep moving it down the road.
And I love that no one ever says this to him in the entire... No one ever says you rely on robotics to live a normal life. No one ever points it out. It's just there for the audience the entire time to think about. And I really appreciate that. And I will say, though, I think this opening section is a little guilty of feeling a little bit rushed, because we get introduced to him and Maya and their relationship. We get introduced to the fact that he's actually undercover and he's actually working for the US. And then she overhears some of this and immediately like holds a gun up to his head. And that part felt like, okay, we're already here, right? We're already at the standoff after we found that out. And I get that it's a prologue. This is really all just set up for what the story's actually going to be. And I do often feel like prologues are the most guilty of this in movies, where they have to just like rush through a bunch of setup. But I did feel a little bit of a rush here. Like, I will say that. I did feel a little bit of like, we're just trying to set up a bunch of stuff here.
I think for me, it wasn't a huge problem in the moment because I wasn't established with like how fast the pacing of the movie was going to be. Looking back on it, yes, it was rushed. But I think what made it even worse looking back on it is that they kind of play it like it was a nightmare as well. Because all the next sequence is him waking up and he's all angry, and then like he's talking to a therapist who says, "Oh, do you still have the nightmares, or do you remember anything else?" And I think that that's even worse for the idea that it is just this entire sequence just very rushed by, but it's also not played as like a dream sequence either. It's played as just a straight memory. I don't know. Something just felt weird about that once it was done.
I'll disagree with that because I never got the sense that it was a nightmare. Like, I get what you're saying, that he wakes up after, but it comes up, there's a title card saying 5 years later, and to me that is a split that is clearly defining, like, this was not something he was waking up from. Like, I'm sure he still has nightmares about it, but it's not.
Yeah, it was more that the next sequence is him talking to a therapist, and the therapist says, "Any more nightmares?" and then clarifies, "Of the night where she died," sort of thing. Like, it's saying that what we just saw is a recurring nightmare that he has.
Yeah, I get that he's recurring nightmares about it, but I never took what we saw as a nightmare version of it. That's just straight up what happened. But we're interested in Nomad here. You know, she goes running for one of the boats that are taking the other, like, you know, robot allies with them, and she jumps on one. But we get a good glimpse of the Nomad here, where it's this big flying like satellite / ship that's going through the sky. And a laser beam comes down, and then after that sort of like gets its target, a missile just drops down. And I don't think it's a nuke, but it's close to.
It's powerful. Yeah.
It's a pretty big, you know, explosion. So there's a big shockwave comes back and hits him in the beach. So he does take a bit of the blast, but he's obviously not killed. But everyone presumably in the water is. So
maybe I just misread this beginning, but I'm like 90% sure that the first time we see Nomad, it is like space. It is way up out there in like outer space. And then I feel like every subsequent time we see it, it is like airplane level, maybe a little bit lower even.
I think it varies.
Am I wrong in that?
I mean, I think it varies. I think it is still, it's definitely in space, because even the third act, like, they're definitely in space when they're on the Nomad. So I think it's just a case of like, depending on the time of day, it looks like it's lower because it's a clear sky or whatever.
Okay. All right.
But I mean, maybe it dips up and down. I don't know. But
yeah,
yeah. I mean, I do like the visual of this laser targeting coming down. Though there's a bit later on in the third act where one of the little bits of technology they have is that they literally have almost like video game style like targets that appear on some of the little boats before the missiles come out. This is not from the Nomad. This is just from like the weapons the military's got. But I was like, oh, this feels like a really, like, I understand why they would use this to mark the targets, but it's making me think of like a video game system where I can see the target reticule over the target.
And it's such a good shorthand for the audience too, because you set it up in this first scene and you say, okay, this blue laser, when you see it, that means danger is here. Like, no matter what, these characters, once the blue laser hits them, are in danger. So by the time you hit midway through the movie, end of the movie, and we keep on seeing it, we don't have to waste time to explain like how the targeting system works. Like you're saying, it's just boom, blue laser, trouble is here. Absolutely. So, I mean, well, a couple of things are a little bit rushed. I can't deny that by the time we got to the end of this prologue, there was so much world building between the opening crawl of all the videos explaining the technology, and then this introduction to the main character and this night that changed his life. You know, and I think we hear him at one point here plead with Maya saying, they're not real, we're real. Like, this baby we're having is real, but they are not real. Like, it really sets up his beliefs and the fact that he doesn't consider the robots to be living beings in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. So also the whole reason that his undercover stuff was being blown is the entire mission is they're looking for someone named Nirmata, which in the New Asian language means creator. And it's essentially the person behind all of the AI stuff. And his mission is, Maya apparently knows who Nirmata is. And so he's trying to get the location from. I don't think it says up in this first scene her relationship to the person. No, that comes later.
Isn't there Mata? I thought it was Namata. I didn't realize there was an R in there.
Yeah, there's an R.
Is there? Okay,
Narmata. I mean, yeah, the way they pronounce it is, it changes depending on who's saying it. Obviously, Ken Watanabe pronounces it much differently than our main character. But no, it's this idea that they're looking for this, and then something changed, and I don't think we get in the first scene exactly what, but the military basically has to bust in and blow his cover because Narmata is not who they thought they were. So at that point, the scene ends and we move on.
Yeah. So, but even after he wakes up, and there's that little therapy moment, which just kind of establishes that he's still recovering from the trauma of all that. But we see that his job right now, he's back in the States, and he is actually part of like a cleanup crew who goes in to Ground Zero, so Los Angeles, where the nuke hit, and they're basically just clearing the surrounding area, eventually, presumably, because one day they want to rebuild, but they have to spend years, and they have like these big high-tech hazmat suits on, because, again, radiation, I assume, from the nuclear blast that was only about 15 years ago at this point, because we've jumped another 5 years. So there's a bit here where they're clearing out some of the cars, and of course, before this nuke, like, most drivers were robots. Like, that was the thing. They had, like, most people had a robot servant or butler or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And they're pulling out this robot, him and this, random, just, help, second character. And the robot kind of wakes up and starts, like, freaking out. And what I think was really interesting about it, to humanize the robot, is that the robot was, like, concerned for, like, I don't know if it was, like, a child or just, like, the woman that he was with, but he was concerned about the well-being of his human. Like, he was like, I need to find her, right? And the woman that's with Joshua doing this job is kind of, like, freaking out and doesn't, like, know how to handle this. And Joshua just sort of, like, reaches behind his head, pulls out a cable, and just turns him off. And, like, she's clearly shook it up. Like, that was, like, did we just kill something?
But even then, the screams are so genuine.
Oh, yeah,
the screams of concern for this girl is, like, so heart-wrenchingly, like, he sounds like he genuinely cares about finding this girl and making sure that she is safe. And then Joshua just rips out the cable, and she's like, that was a person. I don't care who you are. That was a person.
Yeah, he just leans in and says, it's all just code. It's not real. It's just code. And it's like, okay, you're really hitting this hard. You're hitting, like, how he feels about everything here. And I think one of the interesting things they do for him is that in this entire first half or so of the movie, even, arguably even further, is that he doesn't end up getting involved because he stopped caring about this war. He doesn't give a shit about helping America and North America win this war with New Asia. He could not give less of a shit. He doesn't want to get involved at all. The only thing he cares about is when the possibility is dangled in front of him that somehow his wife is still alive, and he cares about getting to her. So his attitude towards robots has not changed. He still doesn't consider them to be real people, but he also doesn't avidly believe in the cause of fighting New Asia either. In fact, there's a great line from way later in the movie when he finally runs into Ken Watanabe again, where Ken Watanabe turns to him and says, do you know what will happen to the West when we win this war? Nothing. And it's such a good line. It's such we don't want to fight with anyone. We just want to live. We're being exterminated. This is genocide as far as we're concerned.
But that's why I also, just expanding on that line, he says, like, nothing. We just want to live in peace. But he's saying that as he's cocking a gun to attack Joshua, because, again, this isn't, it's not a thing where they're not able to break, like, Asimov's laws or anything. They are able to harm humans. They just don't want to. But they also recognize their own survival is on top of that. They want to be able to live freely. They have free will like that.
So they've been forced into this war. That's kind of what he's saying. Like, he's willing to kill here, but he's not. So
they're not out to get revenge or anything. They're just like, we just want to live. Stop attacking us.
So, basically we get Ralph Ineson shows up as a general, and honestly, it's weird hearing him try to do an American accent because he's got such a unique voice. Oh, no, he is very English.
Oh, okay.
He is very English. And you've probably heard his voice in something else. Like,
I'm sure I have. I'm looking him up now. But he sounded fine there. It wasn't anything, like, super standard. I was more impressed with how deep his voice was than anything else.
Oh, always is, yeah. But he's just such a low... He just got cast as Galactus for reference. So
okay.
That's what his next big thing will be. He was in like 2 big video games last year. He was in Final Fantasy 16 and he was in...
Diablo.
neither of which he looked like himself, but it was definitely his voice. You can tell his voice a mile away.
Gotcha. Oh, he was in Bram's the Boy too. Okay.
I do not remember him in that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been in tons of stuff over the years, though.
He was in Chernobyl as well. That's where I saw him from, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Comrade. Yeah, comrade this, comrade that. So he comes in with Alice and Janie. Alice and Janie is actually the one who's going to lead the mission, but they're going into a mission because they want to find a weapon. They believe that New Asia have developed a weapon that could destroy Nomad, right? And Nomad's their big gun that they've been using that's been kind of dominating the war, which technically isn't happening, but it is. And he's like, I don't care. Leave me alone. He doesn't give a shit. And he just...
They make this equivocation to, like, Homo sapiens knocked out the Neanderthals because we were just a little bit smarter. What do you think is happening here with the AI? What do you think happens to humanity if AI, being a little bit smarter than humans, gets to just live? And he's basically like, and you're saying that humans deserve to live, but I think we're okay going extinct now.
Yeah, I mean, she lays it on thicker than that even. She's like, oh, Neanderthals had art, they had society, they had clothes, they had all, they were smart. And do you want to know why they're not here? Because we murdered and raped them out of existence. That was the line. And I'm like, geez, it sounds like you're like, do you think you deserve to keep existing when this is what the human legacy is? I know we didn't do it personally, but you're not making a strong case here for humanity.
I think he's more so trying to drive in the idea of like, if we did it, AI will do it too. So...
Yeah, but this is the thing though, is that human beings, we'd like to think anyway, have moved far, far, far beyond those days where everyone is like that. And AI is starting at a point where they've been raised by humans of the modern era. So in theory... They shouldn't go through that phase. They should be like, I'm not saying not a single AI will become psychotic, because let's face it, some humans still become psychotic.
Oh yeah.
But
I mean, that's just the whole thing of the people up top in the military are the people who go back to those warlike tendencies, and then they're going to ascribe that to everyone else, being like, well, if I would murder and kill people, clearly they'd do it as well.
Absolutely. So when they show him a hologram of what's supposed to be 2 days old footage of his wife alive, this, of course, is the motivation. This is like, okay, now he's going to come, and they even assure him that she doesn't have to die. Like, we'll bring her back. Like, we'll make that promise to you. If you help us go in, because you know the area, you were undercover for years, we can find this weapon, and you can find her and bring her back. So that, smash cut to them in this big fancy new futuristic plane flying to, somewhere in New Asia. So, yeah, like, set up solid. You understand the goal. They're on a mission now. We got all these like jarheads kind of with them going in.
I would say this is like, the scene from Aliens where we get introduced, but like none of these people matter.
No.
There's not a single one that like sticks out as, oh, well, I'm happy we learned about that. The only thing that happens is Howell, the character, sorry, I'm blanking on her name, Allison Janney. Howell relates that the reason she specifically hates AI so much is that her oldest son was also in the war effort. He got seduced by a simulant, and then she killed him because she was part of an insurgency. So she has her own personal vendetta here, which is obviously going to drive her against when Joshua ends up changing some minds later on.
Yeah. And, well, I think it's unfair in a little way to compare like meeting this team to Aliens for two reasons. One, James Cameron is so good at the ensemble like stuff. But two, because these aren't characters that are sticking around. Like one of them is. There's one guy with a beard, McBride. He's sticking around as kind of the main henchman to Janie. Everyone else is going to die in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So there's no point. There's no point in giving them that level of attention, because that's not the purpose in the movie. But there's a lot of stuff here where they're sort of like coming into this town. They realize that the secret base is underneath a village. So we get McBride being just evil and threatening to shoot puppies in the face. So that
it's so comically evil too. Like if he was starting to like shoot the little girl's mom or something, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty bad. Like, but wartime. But no, he picks up the puppy and starts counting down from 3. I'm like, no, you've entered a whole new realm of cartoon villainry there, buddy.
Oh, they've also got a portable like Google Translator device.
I'm sure I think it's like right after this sequence where they're trying to like get in through a door and some scientists are yelling back, and the translator's like, go make love to yourself and your mother too. And it's like, all right, well, the translator's kind of fixing that a little bit.
Yeah, the neuter and a touch, making it PG. I'd argue even still just saying "go make love to your mother" itself, even though there's no swearing involved, it's still just putting it into, it's still a nasty sentence. Anyway, so down here, obviously, there's a lot of fighting going on between the US troops up top. The robotic police of New Asia start to arrive, and we see they're prepped for them a little bit. There's some rockets and things happening. But the real thing that's going on is, inside the base, and it's Joshua eventually being left sort of by himself and wandering into this big door that finally opens, and in the door is a chair with a child. And part of me was thinking, if the wife survived and the baby survived, the baby would be about 5 years old. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, we see it's a robot, and I'm like, okay, fair enough. But obviously, that thought I had wasn't completely silly, but more on that later.
I definitely think that you think it at that point, because obviously we're still teasing the idea that Maya is alive at this point because of the footage that was 2 days old or whatever. So we're still teasing that, and therefore you have to assume that Maya is somewhat responsible for the creation of this robot, even this early on. Yeah.
So it's just the kid, I mean, she's not got her name yet, but I'll just call her Alfie for the sake of it.
Well, the official designation that's on the vault and all that is Alpha O. So that's where we get the name Alfie later on, but it's the idea of like Alpha Omega, the beginning and the end sort of thing.
But Alfie is what she ends up going by. So, quite quickly, there's a robot scientist comes in, or maybe she wasn't a robot. I can't actually remember. It doesn't really matter, because the thing about the New Asia is there's a lot of humans and robots working together, and for the most part, it's actually kind of interchangeable because you may care about them the same either way, right? As side characters, more or less.
Yeah. And in terms of like fight scenes and stuff as well, that is one thing I found very interesting, is that, a gunshot to the stomach is going to kill a human.
Yes.
Pretty much no matter what. But for most of the robots, it's a similar sort of situation. There are very few times where they don't actually disassemble the robot or blow apart its brains or something to kill it. It's like a shot to the shoulder and it's still down, which I don't know. I feel like that could have been expanded upon as to why your average robot gets shot in the arm and it's just like down for the count,
I mean, I think the suggestion there is that because they know they're fighting robots, the weapons have been the technology and the weaponry has advanced to be useful against them. So
it also ruptures their electrical system or something.
Yeah, because we know they also have EMP devices as well. Okay. We'll get into that. But yeah, they're definitely a little bit futuristic in terms of the weapons. Although we do see some robots survive some pretty nasty shots too. So
they are a bit more durable for sure.
And I suppose the idea is that a robot can probably be repaired depending on what's destroyed, as long as their brain, for lack of a better word, their processor and memory. If that's maintained, then maybe they can just be slotted into a new machine.
Which we also do get a little bit of human tech in that way, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later. But anyway, so the kid ends up climbing out. The scientist is there, is like, hey, get out. And this hatch opens up a ladder, and the kid climbs out. Joshua goes chasing after it. And Joshua's goal here, again, to reiterate, is to find his wife. Partly because he feels guilty, partly because he has nightmares about that night, and he wants to reconcile in some way. And obviously, if you stop and think about it, you realize that to reconcile with her, you're going to have to make some peace with your beliefs and your ideals about what she cared about, and you've still not quite done that. Obviously, that's going to be a big part of the story of the movie. But here, he's very laser focused. That's all he cares about. He just wants to get to her. So he follows.
Find her first, beg for forgiveness later.
Yeah. So he follows Alfie out, and luckily they're far enough away from this village when Nomad shows up and starts dropping missiles on it, and it all blows up, and we see a sticky grenades attached to one of the soldiers who climbs back out of the plane with the others, and then it goes on. They realize just before, so they all panic for a second.
They do the whole thing, and they do this twice, which I'm gonna say, fool you once, shame on you. Fool you twice, shame on you even more. How dare you? But they do this thing where she's running across a battlefield, and she clearly gets hit. She clearly gets hit in the back, and it doesn't kill her. And so she still just walks in there, and she's like, yeah, I'm totally fine. I'm like, maybe you should check what hit you. maybe that should be a thing that you should look at, because it's not like this bomb is stealth. It is a big, massive thing on the back of her pack that hit her with some serious force. But they're just like, yeah, no, whatever. Let's just fly away now.
I guess maybe she's thinking she's got a big metal like backpack thing on, so she probably just assumed it was a regular hit.
And it just didn't pass through to her. I mean, maybe. But then they do the exact same thing later on in the movie, and it's like, someone should know that if you get hit in the back and you're not already dead, to check.
Not to be fair, later on when it happens, like she instantly knows and she starts panicking immediately.
I don't think she does.
But Allison Janney gets hit in the back?
Yeah, no, it's only once it starts beeping that she starts freaking out. Like, she gets hit and she's just like, whatever, no problem.
It's definitely quicker. I mean, I have to go back and check to properly argue this, but I'm sure...
I thought it took too long.
I'm sure it's pretty instant at the end of the movie when it happens to her.
All right, fair enough.
But, I mean, regardless, you know, so most of them are dead. Allison Janney wasn't on the plane, though, when it blew up, so she's fine. Bearded Man McBride is also fine, sir. So they team up pretty quickly and effectively just start a two-man manhunt for Joshua, who, at this point, she's already labeling a traitor because he's ran off with the kid. And they get this information. So to rewind a little bit, when Joshua and the kid get to like a little shack near the village, right? They're in there, they're sort of recuperating. He's planning his next move. We learn a couple of things here. One, Alfie can turn off or turn back on the TV after with just by like she puts her hands together a little bit and just thinks about it, and the TV turns on. And we learn through this and through other things as well that she can control technology. She can turn things on and off and manipulate it to her will. And the idea is that eventually, as she grows up, and that also makes her unique because she's growing, unlike other robots, is that she will eventually be able to literally just make the Nomad not work. Just out of the sky. She can just look up at it and she'll be able to take it down.
Which all of the generals and stuff earlier on said, if Nomad goes down, that's it. There is no more war. There's nothing else we can do. It would take too much money and time to be able to like turn the tide again. AI win if Nomad goes down. Yeah,
they say it took 10 years and $1 trillion to build that damn thing. It can't. We wouldn't be able to put it back up in time to, So, like, okay, so we're learning, but she's not that strong yet. She has to be close to things. She can only maybe handle smaller things, perhaps. We'll see the extent of her powers as it goes on. But it's like, okay, that's interesting. We've got an AI who, and the weapon purely is to just disable technology, control technology. That's all it is. It's that simple. But they're so scared of that because it can cripple their entire like war efforts.
Yeah.
So,
which I like the fact that it isn't, because this could easily be something that's a lot stupider in terms of like one side is overly reliant on tech and therefore they're easily susceptible to this child. But I like that both sides, like, there's no Ewok village thing going on here.
No.
Both of them are very much reliant on technology. It's just that one of them is reliant on one specific weapon that is, if it's taken down, it'll be a problem. Whereas the other ones are much more spread out.
Yeah, it's not like the humans, or let's say the humans, the West. It's not like they're not still using technology. It's just not AI they're using. So it's there's still a modern world of the future. It's still relying on everything that everyone's relied on already, probably even more so because that's the way things keep going forward. So yeah, like we get this, and there's like one soldier who's kind of still half alive, who's still kind of sitting there, and Joshua and Alfie bring him with them, and he ends up dying in the backseat. But when Allison Janney and her buddy find him, right, because they basically commandeer, like they get arrested and they're thrown in the back of like the police vehicle, and they effectively just fight their way out and like kill who's there, including like the android cop who's there. They find this other dead soldier who was with Joshua, and they're like, shit, how long has he been dead? And they do a little scan thing, and they pull like a little SD card type thing from the scanner, and she's like, look, he's been dead a few hours, we'll be lucky to get 30 seconds, right? Which I thought was a great line, because it instantly told you what this was. It's like, okay, this is not a bring back to life mechanic, they can't just bring someone back to life willy-nilly, but they can talk to them for like a minute or something just to get a little bit of information. You understand it immediately as soon as she says that line.
They duplicate the brain waves, and that's all just electricity, and they put it into a simulant, and that's enough to make it work.
Yeah, they put it into the dead robot cop, and then he's able... And obviously, most of this 30 seconds is him going, I'm dead! Tell my wife I love her! It's like, no, give us information. Where's Joshua going? Come on, give us information.
Which I do want to critique a little bit on terms of the Colonel's plot is that pretty much they're always playing catch up to Joshua up until the end, trying to figure out where he is and stuff. And while I do think it's creative the ways that they get the information, there's a couple of times where it feels like they shouldn't have been able to, you know?
Yeah,
my biggest gripe is right at the very end, the last time that they have to get info to figure out where Joshua's going to, they are like interrogating a person from New Asia, someone who is blind at this point, so they're unable to see who's talking to them, and they just give up the location as the other person is saying, like, oh, hey, tell us where they went to and we'll send help. And I'm like, I feel like people would be better trained to not give up that information. But what do I know?
Well, no, you've been a bit disingenuous with that scene. One, it's a robot, not a person. And
That's
two, their eyes have been taken out so they can't see who they're talking to. The robot thinks they're talking to allies who are fixing her.
Right, but I also think that would be something that would be like, if you can't see who's talking to you, like, there should be a passphrase or something before you give up the final location where your entire armada is hiding out. You know?
Yeah, but it's ultra specific to think, oh, there might be a situation where we're blind. Like, I don't know, like, that's ultra specific.
I just think that it's weird that they just volunteered that information so easily, you know? And that keeps on coming up every once in a while, where like they're listening to a police scanner and they just happen to hear, oh, we found the child and the other guy as well. Like, it comes a bit too easily on their side of the plot.
I think I disagree with those two examples. I think I'm fine with both of those. I think the one with the eyes makes sense to me. They're going through the motions like they're treating her, and it makes it feel really cold at the end of the scene when Alison Jane just pulls out a gun and shoots her in the head after she's got the information. I think that one makes sense to me. Again, it's quickly kind of conveyed how they've kind of earned trust by being effectively doctors to this robot, and then, you know, just getting what they want. And as for the police scanner, yeah, I mean, there's a manhunt. There's literally billboards with their faces on it saying, hey, this guy's kidnapped a child. The police are looking for them, so it makes sense they're all talking about it on their systems.
Yeah, no, I'm sure, like, it makes sense from, like, an in-universe sort of perspective, but just from, like, a narrative building, it just feels like a bit too unearned for me. It feels like if they are trying to be shown as this hyper-competent, hunting them down sort of thing, I want them to show off their skills a bit. That's why I like this one. This first one a bit more, because it shows like this is something very limited. They have very specific tech for, and they have to be able to get this out. Whereas, like, because of the police scanner thing, ultimately this feels kind of useless, because if they had just kept listening to police scanner, they would have eventually gotten the info.
I mean, sure. I mean, this sets up something else for later, though, so it's important for more than one reason. Right. I don't think I agree with this overall sentiment, though. I don't think we need to see them use their skills to prove that they're good at this. I think they're not the point of the movie. The only real point of them, really, is that they're just always a step behind and that they're going to be a threat later on. The actual, like, how they keep following is, relatively speaking, a fairly inconsequential detail. They give you enough just to get by with it, and then you just go with it. I think there's other things in this movie I would rather they fleshed out than before they even think about fleshing this out even a second more.
That's fair. I mean, if you are describing it that way, they are played up to be the primary antagonists, but in terms of the actual plot itself, they aren't really. The antagonist is the world itself, who's out for both of them for different reasons. So, yeah, I guess that makes more sense.
Yeah, so, but they get into the city, they end up hitching a ride on, like, this family's, like, futuristic van, which takes them in. And they're actually not going to be successful. There's, like, a checkpoint, and they're getting, like, checked out, and, like, the guard's like, hey, there's an extra child here, take off your hat, let's see who you are. And
which, can I just say, that's a very clever way to get around doing the special effects on this child for the whole movie.
I mean,
it's just, all right, we can't show the back of your head, so we're just going to put this hat on you, and that's going to cover up most of the special effects the whole time.
I mean, you say that, but I feel like most of the scenes you can still see the effects coming through the side bits of the hat, so it's not like they were even, like, not doing it. Like, they're okay, maybe they get to save a bit of time by not having to do the whole back of the head, but they were still doing bits of the side, like, the whole time.
Oh, yeah, no, but I think it's a lot easier to, like, map on just some mechanical part moving, like, just under the hat, than that whole hole through the head thing that they gotta do. That's a lot more complicated.
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, she only has it on for, like, maybe half an hour, and then the rest of the movie she's back to having the big whole head.
That's fair.
So, yeah, basically, they're about to have their cover blown, and she thinks outside the box and like turns off all the power on the bridge. So all of their tech, all their flashlights, everything goes off. All the cars stop working, and presumably because a lot of the cars are electric in the future, so everything just shuts down. And it's like their chance to she turns their car back on, and then it's like, you know, they get shot at. Which I actually thought, damn, this is quite cold by these guards. There's like 6 kids in this van they're shooting at, and they're just firing willy-nilly at them. So I think this is probably a good part to sort of jump in and talk about just the relationship between Alfie and Joshua, because there's a little bit, it's after this ride where they're sitting and they get to talk a little bit, and she's asking him questions, because it's not until this point in the movie she starts speaking English. But when she does, she starts asking questions about like how he was created. I think they're on a bus at this point, but she asks how
she's just asking deep philosophical questions about the nature of life.
She absolutely is. She's like, hey, like, you're not a robot, so who made you? And he's like, well, my parents. And she's like, well, where are they? He's like, well, they're in heaven. And then that gets into the philosophical question of like, well, are you going to go to heaven? And he's like, no, only good people can go to heaven. And she's like, oh, I guess neither of us can go then. You're not good and I'm not a person. And it's like, oh, that hit a chord. And this is actually a good really moment to say, I think the performance from this kid is very good. I think she's excellent in this movie.
Absolutely. There was that was always the problem with child actors, is that you got to make sure that they can play up the emotions that they're supposed to their fullest extent. And I don't know how Gareth Edwards is in regards to directing child actors. Maybe he's great, maybe not. But like, this girl brought it the entire time. I
don't know if I can think of like a prominent child character in these other movies. So this might be his first foray into the area. I think what's so good about it, because part of the thing with this character is that she doesn't want to hurt humans, and this is brought up later on. I think Ken Watanabe might say this to Joshua, or maybe it's someone else, but like, she, like, Maya could have programmed and created Alfie to hate humanity, right? Because she's effectively a weapon in the war against them. But she didn't. She didn't want her to have that hatred. She didn't want her to be those things. And it's still kind of fundamentally part of her ideals, whatever you want to call it, to not harm humans unless absolutely necessary for survival, right? So at no point does it ever feel like she is, because you could easily rewrite this movie to have Alfie go on like a bit of a dark turn, like in the end of the second act, where something bad happens because of a human, and she has a kind of like, oh, maybe I do want to like kill the humans kind of moment. And then like a more traditional story about this would have Joshua be the one who eventually kind of like talks her back and sort of proves that humanity can be good and you shouldn't kill them for, you know, these reasons or whatever.
Alfie, just because of that soldier who attacked and killed your loved one, what was his name? John Connor? You don't have to worry about that.
So I like that this does a different thing. Like, and this is because that what I just said is not me critiquing any other robot story that's ever went down that path. I'm saying I like this because it's doing something different, and it's doing something where this side of the conflict very much is peaceful. It very much is you know, they are as humane as possible, and there's a bit of irony there that the humane side of this conflict are the side that are not the humans entirely.
Yeah. I mean, that comes up constantly. During the initial village attack scene, where they find the vault, one of the people in the village screams out that they, just in the general sense, have bigger hearts than you do, talking to the soldier, saying that the robots are essentially more human than these soldiers ever were.
And that's a person saying that, not a robot. That's like a person saying, no, those robots down there are better humans than you are. So... You know, it adds some weight to it. And honestly, she's got a point. He just almost shot a puppy.
Yeah.
You know?
Nah. If you want to set me on a specific side, I'm on the anti-shooting puppy side, no matter what.
I even see a robot with a cat in his lap at one point, petting the cat, and the cat's purring. So you know, you get all the two basic pets. We get to see interact with robots, and they're better.
Not a dog person. All right, here you go. Here's a robot that's okay with cats.
No, all this stuff was good because as they're having this conversation, this is where you get the cutaways to like just different robots in the world doing things. You know. Fishing, taking care of each other, humans, whatever it may be, but just like getting a slice of life.
they're on like a train ride as well, so it's also showing off a bunch of like these big vistas where it looks like a beautiful, because this is all filmed in like Thailand, so it's all this beautiful stuff, but then every once in a while you'll see like this giant factory just in the middle of like a rice field or something, and it's this dichotomy that, like you were saying at the beginning, it's somewhere right in the middle of dystopian but also cyberpunk, where it's like the world has all of this crazy like factories and stuff everywhere that feels very dystopian, but at the same time it's played up as beautiful. It's played up as like, no, this is just how the future of the world is, which leans much more into the cyberpunk aspect of it.
I mean, to be honest, by and large, most cyberpunk has at least some dystopia in it, right? Yeah. I would describe this as cyberpunk first because I think it does lean more towards that, but I think inherently most cyberpunk has at least some dystopia in it. But you can have dystopia without cyberpunk. But typically, if you're going to group them into subgenres, you probably put them together in the same area.
Yeah, I would say cyberpunk is probably a subgenre of dystopia. I think it's harder to have a cyberpunk without the world being just a little bit crap.
No, I wouldn't say it's a subgenre of dystopia because there's absolutely cyberpunk. Like, Terminator is a cyberpunk movie. And that's not a dystopian movie.
That's true, but it's also a time travel one. I think if you focus solely on the future stuff, I think that's a dystopia.
No, it's post-apocalyptic. That's different than dystopia.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. Dystopia slash post. Yeah, I consider those, somewhat in the same thing.
Basically, what we're saying is post-apocalyptic dystopia are just two different sides of a future coin, right?
Yeah.
But it's either one or the other, typically.
Does capitalism win or does nuclear warheads win? One way or the other.
You could have communist dystopia. Potentially.
True.
It's probably been done. I bet it has been done somewhere. But
yeah, that's all the patriotic films that we don't tend to watch.
It's just propaganda. Like, hey, this is what we must stop.
Yep.
Oh dear. No. So yeah, all this stuff looks great, and it really this is where I was really starting to I was enjoying the movie up until this point, but I think this is where I was really starting to feel it. Like I was really starting to feel the vibe of it and feel the connection between these characters. It was a great moment because the whole goal here is to go to the big city, and we get this big cyberpunk-looking futuristic city, right?
Yeah, they specifically have Joshua. Basically, he hasn't connected with the kid up to this point, and he's just yelling at the kid, like, "Here's a map. Point to me where my wife is." And that's the other thing that we skipped over, is that the whole reason that he even knows that Alfie knows is because Maya has a tattoo that Alfie drew one day, and he's like, "Whoa, hold up. Where have you seen that before?" Because that's a very distinctive tattoo that my wife had. So yeah, they're heading to the city because he knows a guy who's he knows tech well enough to be able to crack open Alfie's head and figure out the stuff inside. Yeah, so they're on the way to the city. We get a little flashback to before. I mean, there's been a few little flashbacks actually of when he first met Maya. And then here's where he got this ring that would have a tracker in it to give to Maya. And this is when he's told you have to get close to her, infiltrate, but she's just a mark. Don't go native was the phrase. Don't go native on me. And of course, as they intercut with them laughing on a beach with him, holding his pregnant wife, it's like, oops. Yes, he did in fact go native. But I like seeing the city. This is where it was okay, you're showing off now because you've only got a $70 million budget. And there's movies 4 times your budget that struggle with basic CG, and you're giving me a convincing-looking metropolis here, right? And they're walking through, and they get to this guy who's working a robot factory. And interestingly, this guy who was once a US soldier, because he was giving him the mission, is now living here and is married, or well, maybe not married, but he's at least dating a synth. He's dating a woman, simulant. Robot. Yeah, simulant, whatever. It's a synth. It's same difference. It's just their word for synth. I will say it's not, at least for me, it didn't seem like it was initially revealed that this was a simulant. It seemed like they were trying to play up that this was just a human woman in New Asia, but maybe you read that differently. No, I mean, I think the first time you see her, you only see her from the front, and does she have a scarf or a hood on her? I can't remember, but she's got a full thing of hair, and that covers up the back of the head that hides that she is a simulant. Yeah, I think it's maybe a slight reveal later. I mean, she does have some stuff in her face that looked almost like an implant, like someone in a cyberpunk, another cyberpunk universe might get a modification or something. But
They do. It's actually one of my favorite lines of the whole movie here. Well, there's two good lines in this little section where they're catching up and they're happy to see each other. Because I was thinking, oh, maybe you won't be happy to see him, but no, they do kind of catch up as friends. The two lines that really stuck out to me here, and they both come from Alfie, is one is this is a PG-13, but you get one F-bomb, and the one F-bomb that we get in this is that, oh yeah, Joshua likes to play a game with me where we try not to get him effing arrested by the cops.
Yeah. My favorite game is point to the map and show me where my wife is so we can get out of this effing place. It's like, oh.
So geez. I thought that was fun. The other line that I really liked, though, is when the woman here, was that Cammy, I want to say, maybe?
That sounds right.
Yeah. She leans down, she tries to be nice to Alfie, says, hey, do you want anything from the kitchen? And Alfie hits back with, I want robots to be free. And she's just like, we don't have that in the fridge. How about ice cream? Okay.
And Alfie's like, yeah, great. I love ice cream.
I like ice cream.
So just remember, people, if your people can't be free, ice cream's a good alternative.
Yeah. But she also said she liked candy earlier, so the robots do eat. I mean, do they need to eat? I don't know. But
probably not, but I actually really like that line though, when Joshua was telling Alfie to pick a name because he was just calling Little Sim the whole time, and she's like, what do you like? What's something you like? We can name you after that. And he's like, I like candy. He's like, we're not naming you Candy. That's taken by some strippers in Vegas. Pick another one.
That was my thought. That's a stripper name.
Yeah.
Alpha's good. Alpha's a nice robot name. That sounds sci-fi-esque.
Absolutely.
Go for it. Basically, the two guys stay together and talk about like what's going on. And he's like, "Hey, do you still have the tracker for that ring I gave her? I could use that to find her." Yada yada. Meanwhile, and he even makes fun of her. Oh, did you just call her babe? You like with someone? Like, what's going on here? Meanwhile, she takes up Alfie up to their apartment up in the big high rise, and it's like, "Hey," and this is where we see that she's clearly an android. And hey, we'll order some ice cream, and she asks. This is maybe where the effing game line comes from. But of course, as this is all happening, we also see that like the police are closing in. They're tracking them here. We also see that the villains have heard this in the police scanner. So everyone's converging on the kid, right? They're all coming together, and we actually get this thing where they get delivery from the ice cream man, and it turns out to be the android cop earlier, who we saw there was a duplicate of already.
I love this sequence because the cop doesn't like burst his way into the room or anything. He's just verifying that they're there, and that's why he's posing as the ice cream. But he's doing such a good bit where, like, as he's handing off the ice cream and she's closing the door, you hear him just say, "Please leave a good rating." And I'm like, good to know that's going to be around in 50 years.
It makes sense. It will be.
Yeah.
All hell breaks loose, and this poor woman opens the bag with the ice cream in it, and there's like a grenade inside it, which is just dark. So she dies. Like, she gets blown to bits. It's a whole thing, and eventually Joshua and the other guy come up and like kind of come in, and he has a whole moment where he sees his wife there. Not that he makes it much longer, to be honest. He only makes it a few more scenes, really, but.
Yeah,
he's clearly upset, and I think the important thing here is that Joshua looks down and sees like him get emotional about his dead wife, who's a robot. Like, this is an important thing for him to see. And one of the things that we glossed over, actually, I wanted to mention, is that when they were all together before they separated, there's a moment where Joshua catches himself saying "she," and he corrects it and says "it," and you can tell that it's starting to break through, that he's starting to think of her as a person, but he's like fighting it. He's with every fiber of his being, and I really like that little moment.
Yeah, this is one of the better parts of character development, I think, for Joshua, because obviously the biggest issue here is that he is struggling to see them as real people, and spending time with Alfie is doing a lot, but also showing someone from his past who explicitly told him before that they are not people, and finding him completely in love with this simulant woman is doing a lot more to show, like, no, this is the kind of feelings that you can feel. Don't be ashamed of that. Yeah.
So he's like, hey, can we track this ring? And what's funny is I actually kind of like where this led, because I was thinking, well, there's a good chance that ring is not with her still, right? I mean, he claims he saw it in the hologram that she was wearing. I'm like, I don't know, that hologram wasn't that high quality. How did you see that ring? But but part of me was thinking like that could just be lying somewhere, and sure enough, it's lying where the explosion happened. It's like right at the beach house, you know, like it's right where we last saw her with it. So I really like that. That's where it led them.
Oh yeah. Two things though in that previous sequence that I think we do need to bring up.
Sure.
First and foremost is this is where we get as Drew, who's the friend, is looking over everything to do with Alfie and trying to like break down the tech. He's the one who basically says like, this is the most advanced thing on the planet right now. It's able to control technology, and its range is only going to grow. It's going to grow as a robot, which is unheard of. And then the second thing is during that earlier sequence when they're doing all the philosophical talk, we get little cutaways to Joshua seeing Maya like on a train and like in various different locations, and turns out that they are just simulants. And he brings that up to Drew, and Drew is like, yeah, that the whole way that simulants get their faces is that people donate their likenesses.
This was actually explained before we even see her, because if you pay attention when they're walking through the city, there's actually like adverts on the billboards saying donate your face to a sim. So that was actually in the world already. So it didn't surprise me when we saw her, but yeah, just in case you missed that, he explains it here to Joshua as well.
But that's why they keep on, as they're trying to build up this idea of like, oh, well, let's track down Maya and stuff. Drew's kind of putting out there like, they say that she was definitely human in that 2-day recording thing, but like, we know that they have duplicated their face.
Yes.
She's definitely around. So there's no guarantees now that Maya is actually still alive.
Yeah.
She is most likely than not dead. And I think that this ring being at the location of the explosion is kind of that thing that sets it into Joshua's mind at that point of like, no, she's probably actually dead now.
Yeah. That said, though, there are some things that suggest that, oh, maybe not. Like, you know, that also comes out of that scene, which still gives him a shred of hope to like cling to.
Yeah, there's one thing that Alfie keeps saying is that she's at a location called like Dion Dang or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And he doesn't know where that is. He has no idea, but he's trying to find out.
But they go to this old beach house, which is obviously a wreckage now. But he gets on the hazmat suit, so clearly there is radiation from whatever explosion this nomad thing sends down. And he's going through, although it must not be that severe, because he just takes his helmet off at one point and just doesn't seem to give a shit.
Yeah.
Whereas the other guy, when he comes in to try and get him, he's wearing his hazmat suit quite happily. So clearly he's putting himself at risk. It maybe just shows that he's at a point where he doesn't care. Although, one of the things that is interesting is that the robots don't have to care about this, and that's something that comes up later as well with breathing, is the robots don't have to care about your space and a vacuum and all that.
Right.
They still have to be concerned about getting sucked out into space if such a thing happens, but, but
like they could float around there. It wouldn't matter to them.
Yeah. Probably for a while, I imagine, depending. But they go here, and he goes in looking for stuff. Alfie kind of runs out after him as well, because she senses that the people are coming. She senses that the New Asia forces are coming to the beach house, and she runs in to try and get him. And this is where he has a big turning point, because he basically starts begging her. He's like begging her, like, just tell me, please, tell me, and I'll leave you alone forever. I'll leave you alone. Just tell me where my wife is. And Alfie starts crying. And this is the first real moment where he clearly feels something for this child and sees her as more than a robot, because he realizes how upset she's getting, and he says, I'm sorry, and he starts apologizing. So this is clearly the big turning point where he feels very differently. Now, I like this moment a lot. I do think this is maybe where after this there could have been a bit more development of where he gets to the point where he clearly just cares about her now. There probably could have been a little bit. I think the big thing probably for me is that when he's on the boat and he's like a prisoner, which is pretty quick after this, right? And this is where Ken Watanabe comes in, and he comes down and talks to him in the cell on the boat. Ultimately, Alfie's the one who lets him out so he can get free. And he actually just sort of hangs on to the back of the boat so they take him where they're going. But I think seeing a bit more of their conversation and how she chooses to help him and how he sort of presents himself to her now, I think seeing more of that conversation would have went a long way to giving you that next step that would have filled in a little bit of a missing gap here.
Yeah, I see the bridge that they were building here, and I don't think that it was poorly done. But it does feel like this is the instance where all of a sudden they are thick as thieves, and there was just something missing somewhere in there to get them to where they end up being in the next step, where it feels like he's essentially more focused on saving Alfie than his wife now, or at least at the very least they are equal objectives to him. And I don't feel like we quite got that turning point of showing how he got there.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's like that on the boat, but I think there's an important thing once they get to like the village that's near the other places that everything's going, where he's sneaking around. No one else knows he's here, sneaking around under the walkway. Hold on, this is important.
Okay.
Where he hears Ken Watanabe talking to some of the others, and they're like, shit, like, we have to take out that nomad soon. It's getting close. They're going to find us. Mm-hmm. Is she strong enough yet to take it down? And he's like, no, her range is nowhere near good enough. But if we can get her up there, she can take it down from there. And the other guy's like, but how can she survive that? And the implication is that no, she can't. Like, this would be a suicide mission, and this is her purpose. And Joshua hears all of this underneath the floor. He's sneaking around. And I think that's the point when he hears this where I think his goal shifts. And it makes sense to me that is where his goal shifts, where he's like, no, wait, you can't do that to her. Now he cares more about her than he does about New Asia's goal. Not that he ever really cared about New Asia's goal, but, you know, like, he cares more about the human element. The irony is that he cares more about her as a person individually than even her own side does, because to them, she's still just kind of a weapon, ultimately.
Yeah, that's it's the ideological side of things, where you're missing the individual people rather than for the greater good sort of concept.
The greater good.
Yes. The one thing I wanted to throw back is that during the sequence where his human friend runs in and like tries to warn him that the other people are coming, this is where he gets shot, he's killed, but his last dying thing is to tell him that the whole reason that his cover was blown is because they discovered that Nirmata is not like another person. It was just Maya.
Yeah, it used to be her dad. But she inherited it. So even at that time, she was already the new Nirmata. And that's why they were coming in. So any promise to like bring her back alive, even if they believe she was alive, this is the point where he definitely knows, no, they were never ever going to entertain that. Like, they want her dead.
Yeah, and you immediately like flash back to that scene where he's saying like, you know, he's held at gunpoint or whatever by his wife. And he's just like, they don't want you, they want Nirmata. And looking back on that now, it's just like, ooh. Well, that wasn't going to ever work.
Yeah, that stung in hindsight. Yeah, no, that's an important plot detail that comes up. It's interesting because obviously we get to this idea, right? And this is probably a good place to kind of start to bring in like what exactly Alfie is beyond like what we know already, which is that she's not their kid, right? She isn't. But this project of Alfie started when Maya was pregnant, and she's like a fusion of like robot and human, and the human that she's kind of a fusion of is a clone of the embryo that she was pregnant with, right? So in a weird way, even though we find out that she really did die, I mean, she's technically not dead yet, right? She's on like a life support system, but it's kind of interesting. Obviously, the baby didn't survive that. It couldn't, right? And she's effectively dead, just not in technicality yet. But this one piece of her that lived on is this android, is this sim. And I think this realization for Joshua is one of the most interesting things in the movie, is the idea that he has to accept that this is all, because if you, again, go back to that opening and we talked about how the thematics of him having to rely on a robotic arm and a robotic leg and him being okay with that, realizing that all that's left of that marriage and potential child is Alfie. Like, she is the product of that.
And that's what I really appreciated about this scene between Ken Watanabe and Joshua, which is him just laying it out, saying like, here's exactly what happened. Here's who this child is. Here's who Alfie is. And again, from Joshua's perspective, it really makes sense that this is the period where he latches on, because it is explicitly told to him, this robot is based off of your future child who never got to be born. Like, if you want to have a piece of your wife anymore, there it is. And again, it's just kind of blurring this line when you say that Alfie is based off of a embryo like that. Is where's the line again? Where's that line of humanity? Because obviously this is this is based off of a person who never even actually existed.
Yeah, so, she's kind of a miracle in a way that she gets to exist in some form at all. I do think it's really important though that scene where he breaks down, apologizes, and sees Alfie as human. I think it's very important that that happens before he knows that she's based on his daughter.
Yes,
because that means it wasn't colored by that. It wasn't something where it's influenced just because it happens to kind of be a relative, right?
Yeah.
It's something that happens independently where you just sees her as a human, and then you add on that extra layer of attachment where, oh, this is kind of like an echo, if you will, of what child you might have had, before one day. So I think that stuff's really cool. I think that stuff's all really fascinating to find out.
That's as much as he figures out this stuff at this point. I guess that's kind of what I wanted from the other side of it. Is how much did Alfie know?
I don't know if she did. I didn't get the impression she did.
Because I would think that if it would maybe color things differently if the whole time that this was going on, Alfie knew that like this is technically like her biological father in a lot of ways, or is it something that she overhears later on and she only figures out later on? Because obviously by the end of this movie, it is very much a father-daughter relationship. It is very much of a parent-child thing going on. But at no point in this is it ever made clear to the audience how much Alfie knows of their relationship.
Yeah, they leave
outside of this is your mother's ex-husband, pretty much.
They leave it open for us to interpret how much she kind of knows at any given point, especially in the back half of the movie. I think what's interesting about this entire reveal to me is that I can imagine a version of this that I absolutely hate. The idea man befriends robot child, it brings back some of his humanity, but then we find out it's kind of his child or based on his child. I can see me hating that reveal, but I think one of the reasons, I think there's many reasons, but one of the reasons why I think it really works in this case is what I was saying earlier about going back to the idea that he, first of all, his views on robotics, but the idea that he relies, he lost an arm, he lost a leg, and he was able to replace that and still find a way to live a fulfilling life with those things. So the idea that his entire child has been replaced with a robot, but you could argue philosophically, does the robot have the child's soul in some sense because she seems to be alive? I think that's a really interesting way to go. So they set up enough things thematically and in plot way where I didn't get to this reveal and go, rolling my eyes, everything has to be connected, it has to be his kid. Enough of it made sense to me in terms of what the story was trying to achieve with what it was making us think about, that it felt like the most natural, right thing to do at that point in the story.
I also think it just exactly what you were saying there is it felt like the natural right thing to do. I think that they did enough kind of seeding beforehand. I think I would have hated this a lot more if Ken Watanabe paused, looked dead into the camera and was just like, "It's your child, Joshua." If they had that kind of moment, I'd be like, "Oh God, yeah."
No, I agree. They kind of avoid doing the obvious hammy version of a lot of the little lines they could have done, a lot of the little moments, right? And I think the idea that he gets to go up eventually to see Maya, right? It's after he's kind of proven himself to. Actually, I'm skipping a bunch
there's
of
a
stuff.
middle fight scene.
Yeah, there's a whole big fight scene here where Alice and Janie's called in the reserves and ships show up, which actually has one of my favorite set pieces of the whole movie here.
Okay.
Which is they end up in opposite sides of this bridge connecting two of the islands, and the West, the North Americans, send in basically an R2D2 style droid that's walking along. It's not wheels, it's got little legs, but it's hobbling along like a big bucket. And they're just suicide bombers. That's all they are. They're not they're not people or as smart as the other AI. They're just designed to be suicide bombers. But Alice and Jay's okay, send in number one, and number one goes in, and there's this heavy smoke because of all the explosions and stuff that have been going off. So it comes through the mist effectively. And Watanabe's there, he's got all these people around him, and they're all ducking for cover. They've got guns, and they see this thing, and they start shooting at it, but it doesn't stop it. It's obviously clearly designed to be quite thick so that it can withstand a bunch of fire. And it just keeps walking until it gets into one of the huts and just blows up. And it's they fired tons of rounds at that. It didn't stop it. A second one gets sent in, and it comes through the mist. And then you just see Alfie sitting in front of it, and she puts her hands together and just stops it dead in its tracks. And I love this because we've seen her use her powers a few times, and we've even seen her use her powers a couple of times to get them out of a jam because, they're about to be caught, and she uses her powers or whatever. But this was no, this is a visual representation of her stopping this war. She's literally on this bridge between both sides of this fight, and she's just stopped it dead in its tracks. And it's only because someone else intervenes to get her out of harm's way or whatever that it breaks her concentration and it turns back into a bomb again.
Well, it's what is it? The bearded guy, McBride, I guess.
He comes up. He comes up.
He shoots Alfie like in the shoulder. And
great. I forgot about that.
There.
Yeah, he's just on the shoulder, and then Joshua comes swooping in to save the day and shoot him, and he kills him there. Actually, kills McBride. But obviously it's turned back into a bomb at this point, so they have to go running from the bridge, and the boom goes boom. So
that's the part that I really like, though, about Alfie standing there, because it's not so much as just a power off, which is how we've always seen her using her powers up to now.
This is like a protester standing in front of a SWAT guy, like a protest or something. It's that type of visual.
The bomb, despite we see it just being nothing but a tank with just orders, march forward as much as you can and then blow up. We see it come to a stop and get down on its knees and kneel before Alfie, and Alfie places her hands on the box, I guess, lid, whatever you want to call it. And it's this moment that almost really furthers this religious aspect to it, that this is the savior character. This is someone who the robots see as the one who's going to deliver them from this hellish war. No matter which side they're on, the robots still see them as the peaceful option here.
Yeah, I can't, this sells the entire theme of the movie, that this is about ending this peacefully, and that this child is a powerful weapon, but not a weapon that's going to fire missiles, not a weapon that's going to blow... I mean, okay, they'll blow up Nomad, but they're not going to blow up cities, they're not going to blow up anything else. She's just going to stop them from attacking. That's it. And that's the threat that the West are trying to destroy, and it makes the West... I always love a movie where the Americans are the villains. I always enjoy that.
Oh, yeah, no, we suck.
So I get a lot out of that. So I think that's great. But obviously she's injured here, and this is what leads her hey, let him take her up to where Maya is. Let him go see her. And this is where they pay off that thing where she, Alfie's been calling, saying, hey, she's in this place the whole movie. And when he's going through the gate, the robot there who's walking out, he brings this up. And the robot says, oh, that's just their word for heaven. And he's like, oh, no. And, let's just think in. Because, again, there's been this recurring idea that she doesn't think she can go to heaven, right? That's come up a few times. It's going to come up again before the end. There's a great moment where they're both crying, and he's like, oh, we're going to go to heaven. Don't worry, you'll be there, right? And I'm going to go there because of you. We'll get to that later, but it popped out of my head.
I can't believe, maybe it was a timing thing, maybe it's because it was sci-fi. I can't believe that this kid did not get some sort of nomination for acting in a major category, because she did fantastic.
She did. When she gets emotional later on, it's so well done. But because they send her up to here thinking, oh, this is going to help fix whatever damage was done, but ultimately, we see Maya's on a life support system. She's just lying there, and Alfie explains that, because of from the very start, and this is something even Ken Watanabe said, right? So we sort of glossed over this part of that little conversation when he was on the boat as a prisoner, is that the West believes we nuked Los Angeles, but we would never do that. It was a coding error. Because I was expecting them to be a reveal, even at the start of the movie, as soon as they say, I was like, oh, it's going to turn out that the AI didn't do this. This was either it was a scapegoat for something else or whatever. But I do kind of like that it's not a big thing. It's just, no, someone made a mistake and it led to this. That's all it was. But we would never harm humans because we were always designed never to harm for no good reason. And here it comes up again at the deathbed of Maya, where she's been lying here, and she honestly, we should send her on. We've been wanting to let her go because we're just keeping her alive for no reason. But we cannot just willingly turn her off. We can't do that, but you can. And she's effectively asking Joshua to end her life. So he's in the span of 2 minutes has been hit with the fact that she's not really alive like he was hoping. He's not going to get his resolution with her, although he does kind of later, but more on that in a bit.
Yeah, we get there.
Yeah. But he also has to be the one to actively choose to end her life. And it's a very well done scene. It's very emotional.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
It's also played up. As much as he's grieving, we also see her grieving as well. We see Alfie, because this is the character that is associated as mother. Like, this is the mother figure here. And I think it's like right before the unplug happens, she just says like, goodbye, mama, or something like that. And it's like, God, please stop.
Allison Janney shows up with like a bazooka or whatever it is.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of time to grieve here.
And there's a whole standoff, but ultimately Ken Watanabe sacrifices himself to deal with the. Well, he actually doesn't die, but he gets shot with a big hole through his stomach.
Yeah, he has a grenade launcher. He fires that off at Allison Janney as soon as she turns back around, and then she puts a hole through his stomach. Turns out he managed to survive through that, as we see at the end of the scene. But bigger is that the grenade starts beeping. It's about to go off. The other soldiers around Allison Janney are trying to help, and then it stops beeping. And we look over and we see Alfie doing the hand thing, stopping the grenade from going off. But because she's using her powers, the other soldiers are like, quick, stop it. It's using its powers. And Allison Janney's the only one who realizes, like, wait, crap, that's the only thing keeping me alive. Don't shoot.
I love this. I love that Alfie's keeping her alive, and it's only because they try to harm her that she can't concentrate on it, and that's what gets Allison Janney. It's beautiful irony for her death.
It's perfect, because it's in that last moment that you realize, like, my life is in the hands of this, and I just screwed it up.
And I think Ken Watanabe, obviously we see later on that he has survived fully, and he'll still be around, but I don't think he knows that for sure in this moment, so he's like, hey, Joshua, like, take her, destroy Nomad, like, do it, finish the job, like that. This is like what you need to do
it in honor of your wife. It's what she would have wanted.
But they actually get grabbed by the US forces when they're trying to get away, so they actually get separated, and so they've got the weapon.
Which I do actually like the idea that Allison Janney was telling Joshua, like, hey, look, you hand over the weapon right now, everyone will think you're a hero. Like, I'm not going to tell them what happened here. You can go back, just do it now. So when they do end up leaving the temple and get grabbed by the U.S. forces, everyone in the U.S. is like, oh, Joshua, hey, you're a hero.
Yeah, you got her. Absolutely great. Fantastic.
Hop on board. You're allowed to come back consequence-free.
Yeah. Is it when the General, whatever, Ralph Ineson shows back up, they're back in L.A., and they've got her strapped to a chair.
This is where I was thinking the chapter title needed to show up. Is that where you were thinking as well?
Yeah, around here, or maybe after this scene, possibly. Like when it looks like he's killed her, and maybe something like, I don't know, the Nomad or whatever the last chapter could be called. But yeah, around this part, I would have probably put it after this scene, because the big dramatic ending to this chapter would be the supposed death. But
that's fair.
You know, either way. Is this where the General throws the line back at him without knowing he's making a reference, of course? But he says, "Oh, she's not real. She's just code. It's mirroring what he said to the woman at the start." Yeah, I like that. So one of the little moments earlier on, when it's when Joshua sneaks in when they're all asleep, and he takes her back from Ken Watanabe before all the attack stuff happens at their village. He turns off Ken Watanabe, and she looks at him as she wakes up and looks concerned, like, what did you just do to him? And he's like, oh no, stand by, not off, just stand by. Like, he just went to sleep, he'll be fine. And that's a setup for here, because they're like, hey, we want to take her, we want to disable her, but she's using her abilities to stop us, so the methods we can use to turn her off are going to be very, very nasty.
Yeah,
so
they're basically saying, like, we've got technology to turn her off that'll make it painless, but she keeps disabling it. We do have access to crowbars. We'd rather not.
So it's like, hey, you go in and end it peacefully, and this can all be over, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So he goes in, he does whisper something in her ear. We don't get to hear what it is, but it does look like he puts her down. Obviously, I didn't believe that he did, obviously, because it's, you know, that's not what the end of the movie is going to be. But it works well enough in the moment if you feel the emotion. And he notably says afterwards that he wants to be there when they go to burn her, go to like destroy her at the facility. And the General's like, it's not a funeral. And he's like, it is to me. And, you know, so it's kind of completing like his arc of like, now he fully cares about her as a person. We're at that point. But of course, when they're on the way to the facility in their vehicles, he leans over and we get like a little. Well, we get a little. They were worried what he whispered to her, so they've actually spent time trying to like figure out what he said, and they've got like algorithms decoding what he said, and we get to hear it finally, where he's like, "Stand by, not off," and then obviously he gets her to wake up in the car, flips the car over, bunch of stuff, and they're on the run for the final act of the movie to go and do their big mission. So
and they make their way to LAX.
Yes,
because where else would it be?
But there's flights to the moon.
Yep.
Also, I love that LA got nuked, but LAX survived. I love that detail. Yeah. The airport's indestructible. Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
We can't destroy that level of a public image. LAX is always going to survive. As we saw in last week's, or no, this was a couple weeks ago now at this point, but Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
The one airport that survives.
I don't know if we see LAX in, oh God, what was that movie called? Ad Astra. But you do see like a sort of commercial flight to the moon, and like the airport on the moon has like all the stores that you'd expect, like Starbucks and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, I love seeing these like visions of the future where it's like, we still have to account for the fact that all the commercial shit would still be here.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I feel like this movie, and thank God it didn't, because I would have hated it. But there were a lot less advertisements than I was expecting. Like, a good 40 years in the future now, I expect to not be able to blink without seeing an advertisement inside.
I wouldn't have minded some, because it would have felt realistic enough to have stuff around. But
I mean, we had, like, you were mentioning before, the general stuff of, like, donate your likeness to whatever. But, like, I shouldn't be able to not see, like, Facebook or whatever the future version of Facebook is somewhere around up there.
Yeah. Maybe social media was outlawed in 2055. Who knows?
God, that would have been a utopia no matter what.
So basically they get flights, and obviously like they're looking for them, right? They're trying to find them, and her, Alfie's abilities come in really handy, because like the little bot that's like screening the tickets for the plane, she just kind of like, like,
what is the purpose of your trip? Freedom. Go on.
But obviously once they realize they've boarded a flight, like the general and the military go into air traffic control and say, bring everything back, nothing goes.
It's also important to note that this final attack that they made on the temple and all that, they also picked up the information of where all of the AI strongholds are.
All the bases,
They're about to launch their final attack via Nomad to take out all of them.
And just to reiterate, all these AI strongholds are equally human and AI. It's all robots and humans living peacefully in harmony. So it really shows that this is not just about AI versus humans. This is about... it makes it more of a race in a sense, because it's like, the race has allies, other humans who sympathize and say, no, these should be allowed to live. They are more human than most people I know. So let's go down that path. So what's great though is that when they try to turn back the plane, or I say plane, it's more of a shuttle because it's got space, because it's meant to go to the moon.
Like the interior is just like a Boeing, like it's a normal plane.
Yeah. Well, when you think of the space shuttle, it kind of makes sense that it could get to that stage. But basically, Alfie just puts her hands together and starts taking control of the plane, which I think was always the goal anyway, because it wasn't going to the Nomad, it was going to the moon. So I think that was always going to be how they got there. So they let, like, basically everyone else gets to evacuate, I think.
The plane stewardess is just like, due to situations beyond our control, we are now at a military installation. Please just obey whatever the military people say.
Yeah, but most people from the station do evacuate, but some robots and some human soldiers, obviously not robots. Why would there be robots? An outlawed AI space station. But they come out of the plane and they've got a plan though. Basically, Alfie's strapped to a chair, buckled in, and Joshua's put on like a spacesuit, and he opens the hatch just so that they depressurize, so all the humans just start flying out into space, and they just die. It's like, I was like, okay, you can really play with this idea that Alfie doesn't need to breathe, so you don't have to worry about dealing with that. As long as you're strapped in, you're good. And this
is where they split up. So Alfie is told, hey, they're about to start launching the missiles to take out all the AI stuff. Go in there and stop them.
I do have one critique here I want to make.
Okay.
I do think they could have done a better job explaining that just because the missiles have launched, because we see the missiles launch and they're on their way and they're still sort of doing the race against time thing. And I like, obviously once we get to the end and we find out that, oh no, once the system shuts down, the missiles won't detonate. They'll just kind of like land. But I thought that it would be like a race to stop them from launching. So I thought they could have done a better job of maybe just setting that up, because I was like, but they've already launched. What are we doing now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they wanted to stop any of them from launching. A few of them get out before they actually
yes,
stop it. But yeah, I do think it's an issue of they didn't make it clear that the missiles were still good to go and that there was anything that could be done to stop them from that point.
Yeah. So
I'll agree there. And then that's the other thing, is that it's actually coming down to Joshua. Joshua's the one planting bombs and stuff, that he's going to be the one that blows up Nomad in the end. But he needs Alfie back on the shuttle before that happens.
Yeah, they're going to meet back at the shuttle. Instead, she takes a detour on the way back and goes to a room full of decommissioned robots. Yeah. And finds one that looks like her mum. It looks like Maya. And notably, and we sort of left this a little bit out, but when they were leaving Maya, like the real Maya, they did get the little SIM card out of her, implying that we've got her consciousness to come back up at some point. Now, what I really appreciate about the setup to all this stuff is that go back to that first time this was all introduced, and Alice and Janie said he's been dead for hours, we'll be lucky if we get 30 seconds. I love that implies that it'll never be permanent, but if it's more fresh, you will get a bit more time. So I like that that's set up here. Because I was thinking, like they could do a lot here where like he's going to get like maybe she'll get to just live forever as a robot or something, and that'd have been cheesy. I really like that. No, he's already doomed by the time we get to her. It just gives him a chance to have a moment of closure with her before they both die together.
I mean, if you go back to a line that was said earlier on during that initial philosophical talk, it was Alfie asking what's heaven, and he says it's a peaceful place in the sky where you're with your loved ones.
And they're in the garden area, the station. They've got like a botany area, so they're actually running through a field to each other in space. So it's this peaceful place in the sky. Yeah. No, it's really, and that's really nice, because obviously we get the whole thing where he ends up not being able to get back onto like the safety like pod, the evacuation pod, whatever you want to call it. And she ends up in there, and she's like begging for him to come, but there's this drone being controlled by the military that's getting in the way. So we get a little bit of an action scene with that. But ultimately, it's all down to the dramatic goodbye where I can't come with you. It's okay. I'm going to get to go to heaven because of you. You made me a better person, is effectively what he's saying. And she's crying, and her performance here is great. His performance is great. It really sells it. And what's so good about the whole setup with the sim, with the mum's face, is that he doesn't know that she's done this. Like, she was trying to wake her up. Because she doesn't wake up. She just like, oh, it didn't work, and she goes away. But obviously, the camera just sort of stays on her a little bit to let you know she's going to get up. And I actually thought she was going to show up and save him, and that was going to be like her few minutes alive was going to be saving him. I actually appreciate they didn't do that. I appreciated that it was this moment of peace between them where
it was the unexpected reward for his ballad.
Yeah, she gets to know that he became a better person after her like effective death 5 years ago, that he did grow to know their robot child and made the right choices, and like is more proud of himself, and it helped. Like, she gets to know that. He gets to have this final moment, which is what he wanted from the start of the movie. He wanted to have a chance to reconcile and make some form of peace with her. So it's not some everlasting happiness, but it almost makes it more powerful that it gets to just be this moment of happiness before the entire Nomad comes crashing through the sky and starts crashing into like random parts of dirt and whatnot.
Yeah, and then as soon as the first explosions go off, all the missiles that were still en route just crash down. Yeah, like they're duds. They're not going to explode
Ken Watanabe's having a great day. He's looking delighted. Yeah. And the final shot of the movie is Alfie getting out of the safety pod that's landed and just looking up and just smiling of like, she's kind of crying because obviously she just lost Joshua, but it turns into kind of a smile because her purpose is like being fulfilled.
They are free. They are good. Even if it's not immediately easy, because I'm sure the war just won't be ended overnight. It's still, they have a chance at the very least. And all the AI population is just chanting Nirmata, which is seemingly signifying that Alfie is taking that next role as the creator. Yeah,
which makes sense. So, it's a really good climax. It's big, it's bold. It's like, as much as the effects have been impressive the whole time, now we're getting into space, and that all still looks pretty good. Like, everything holds up remarkably well, given that it is a relatively speaking, a low budget movie by today's standards. For a movie with this concept, it is low budget. There's like I say, there's movies with triple, 4, 5 times the budget that don't look as good as this does with its visual effects.
Yeah.
So
I think that really is just an idea of, I mean, I'll call it the George Lucas effect, though I'm sure other people are far worse with it. It's the idea of you think that special effects can do everything, and therefore you don't limit your ideas down at all. I think that this is the opposite of that, where the ideas inherently are not that super complicated or hard to get onto film, and as such, the special effects are able to work with it rather than them just trying to force the special effects to do what they desire in the end.
for sure. And it's not necessarily the best story ever told about someone who's against robots and doesn't think they're life, because getting over that and having that arc. But is there's definitely much worse. This is much better than say iRobot, right?
Oh yeah. I
Which,
mean, even if you ignore the robot aspect of it, this is essentially just another race. It is another group of people. You could boil it down to any sort of like war movie from back in the day, where it's like, oh, World War II, we're in the Japanese theater, and the Japanese are inhuman for whatever reason, and then a character learns why that's wrong and grows as a person.
yeah, but of course the sci-fi part just makes it all a lot cooler. like it's hard to deny that seeing these big laser beams coming down from Nomad is kind of cool.
Oh, absolutely.
Works because we care about the story at a certain point. And this had generally fairly good reviews, but there's definitely it's not like high enough on Rotten Tomatoes to say it was like unified praise. It was definitely it's in that, I think it's like in the mid 60s, high 60s, around there. So it's kind of like, okay, a lot of good buzz, but not universal. Some people don't like it. It's not going to work for everyone. But for me, this is an example of the type of standalone sci-fi movie I'm glad can still slip through the cracks. I'm glad we can still get these. And I'm sad that I didn't see it last year so that I could possibly include it on my top 10 of the year or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So. No, I mean, it was, I wasn't as familiar with everything that came out last year. Obviously, we've got a few lined up on the schedule of things that are us catching up on, but I definitely think that this is one of the better ones that I've seen in terms of the last like 4 or 5 years, give or take. It's something that, again, I can't help but compare it to Rebel Moon, because they are both this idea of starting up a new thing just from scratch. And it's so much better in just every single way, because it feels like it came at it from the story angle first. There was a story that wanted to be told, and the atmosphere, the sci-fi-ness of it is adding to that, rather than it being the core concept and then just layering a story on top of it.
Yep, absolutely. Figure out what you're trying to say first and then build around that.
Yes.
And if you don't do that, it might feel like you had nothing to say in the first place, which is maybe what Rebel Moon is. So it's a whole thing.
Yeah, we've talked enough about Rebel Moon until part 3 comes out. Sorry, threw up a bit. My bad.
Yes. Hopefully that's still enough. I don't know if it is, but I know he wants to do several more, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Anywho,
I'll gladly take a Creator 2 before any more Rebel Moons.
Yeah, but I don't need one, and I don't think it's built to have a Creator 2. I mean, you could do something else in this world, but the main character is dead. His story was complete. I suppose you could do more stuff with Alfie growing up and whatever the next part of her story is, but I wouldn't root for it. I'm happy for this to be left alone as a standalone movie.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, if they said Creator 2's coming out, I wouldn't immediately be like, oh, okay, the franchises have won, no IP is safe, sort of thing. I think there is still an interesting story that could be told in this world, but like you said, I don't need it. I'm happy with this just being a one and done and we never come back to it, because it is just solid in its own right.
That said, if they call it the Destroyer, I will at least applaud creativity in the naming.
Yeah. Creator 2, the Destroyer.
No, just the Destroyer. Don't be...
Oh, yeah, no, clearly.
Just dumbing it down wide. Okay, David, what are you rating the Creator?
God. So I was enraptured the whole time. I don't think there was anything in it that was inherently bad. So I do think it's reached at least an 8 in terms of ratings. Because I do consider it to be a great film. I do have some misgivings. Like I said, I think that a little bit of the plot not the plot, but the relationship between Alfie and Joshua It felt like it had a solid setup and a really solid payoff at the end. That last scene between them was heart-wrenching. But I do think that a little bit in the middle was skipped in terms of developing why they ended up liking each other so much. Like, obviously the reasoning is there, but we just didn't get to see it. But all in all, that's about the only critique I can really lobby against it. Visually, it's fantastic. I like the ideas that they're playing with in terms of what makes a human and all of that sort of aspect. So all in all, I think I'm probably going to bump it up to an 8.5, but that's about, I would hold it back from 9 territory as it stands.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think for me, I'm going to go with a straight 8 for now. It's the sort of thing that maybe in repeat viewings, it might even go up in my estimation. But I mean, I think coming out of it, my main thoughts are, I think they nailed a lot of the emotion. They nailed the world and the visuals and the themes. There's maybe a couple of rough edges that we've talked about, a couple of little nitpicks or whatever. But it definitely feels like it's filling this void that doesn't get filled every year, but it's that type of District 9 level, interesting sci-fi movie that's punching above its weight kind of thing. And it feels like it's very much this little, like, era feels too big a word, but like this little batch of years, like version of that, and we'll get another one maybe in 3 or 4 years, and hopefully that keeps going where we keep getting interesting sci-fi. I'm really glad that Edwards has kind of stuck to science fiction. Like, all of his movies are sci-fi in some way or another, and it's exciting because it's like, oh, well, what do we get, from him next time? I think Rogue One kind of destroyed him a little bit. I know he went into a bit of a cocoon afterwards because it took a lot. Because I think there was a lot of like reshoots, re-editing. That one was a bit tough on him, and I think I'm glad that it's not sort of knocked him out of the game, because I remember Josh Trank was meant to do a Star Wars movie, and Fantastic Four stopped it. But I don't know if he's done anything since then. So I'm glad that we're doing.
Sure.
So we will be doing his next movie though, Gareth Edwards, because his next movie is Jurassic World 4.
Oh, well, see, now I'm of two minds.
Here's the thing. That last Jurassic Park was absolutely terrible, and I can't wait for you to do all those in homework, so you have to complain about it yourself. But I will say, Gareth Edwards has made multiple movies that I have enjoyed where he's talking about big monsters, so he's probably the most inspired choice for a Jurassic Park movie they could have made.
That's the question I'm having. If I really like the director, but the IP has been exhausted, is it still possible?
I will say I expect them to move on from like Pratt and like those characters. I think this will probably be the start of another era. They're calling it Jurassic World 4 as like a temp title just now, but I'm willing to bet this is the start of a new like trilogy or something.
Jurassic Universe.
Jurassic Land.
Jurassic Planet.
They call theme parks that.
Yeah. Do want to just say Josh Trank has had one more film.
Oh, what did he do?
It was called Capone. It was released in 2020. It had a budget of $20 million and it made back under $1 million.
I haven't even heard of it, so
yep.
I'll take their word for it.
I'm not sure if it had a theatrical, but it looks like it was distributed by Redbox, which...
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that explains something.
As you do. Honestly, it's painful to me looking at Gareth Edwards' IMDb, and that Rogue One has easily the highest rating of his 4 movies, and I think it is easily the worst one. But you know,
whatever. Just more people behind it.
Star Wars fans are Darth Vader had a lightsaber. Oh, I got a boner. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to support the show and all the content and whatnot, you can do that over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Me and David do a couple of bonus shows monthly over there, such as Criterion Cut, where we review some movies from the Criterion Collection, so you get your arty-farty movies. And we do Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made. The total opposite of arty-farty. I don't even know what the opposite... What's the opposite of art? There's a word. Like, what's the opposite?
Snyder.
And the opposite of fart.
I mean, that would be smelling good. So
no,
like,
yeah. Snyder shit. Let's call it Snyder shit. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Farty and Snyder shit.
And there's also bonus content on Patreon for other shows. There's a horror movie podcast, Screams After Midnight, I do with Tim. That's get bonuses on Patreon as well. Go check out all that if you haven't. It helps keep the lights on. We are very thankful for everyone who does contribute. I wouldn't be able to keep doing this as full-time as I do without all the Patreon support. So please go have a look if you're interested. But all support, all watching, listening, liking, all that stuff helps out a bunch. It's all appreciated.
Yes.
Next time, David's about to do his homework section, of course, but next time on the show, just to tease that first, we will be looking at a vote winner, another 80s vote winner, and that is Man Facing Southeast. I was going to say Southwest there. Man Facing Southeast. So, curious thing that I've not seen. This was the possible gems vote, so it might be really good. It may not be, but I'm curious to find out. We'll see.
Yeah, give it a chance.
So, that's coming next time on the show. Collector's Cut, which is the other podcast me and David do, is currently in 90s disaster season. So if you like the idea of us talking about Dante's Peak and Volcano, you can go and get those episodes right now, either on the same YouTube channel or over on the Collector's Cut audio feed. Anyway, David does a homework movie every week where he goes back and watches a sci-fi movie that me and Tara did in the show before he joined, so he can catch up and everything. David, what was this week's homework movie?
Well, you know, I just really felt like, ooh, lightsabers, gonna get a boner, so...
We didn't do that movie, though, but okay.
No, not Rogue One. That one even didn't have lightsabers, I don't think. No, I decided to go with Return of the Jedi, which, I'm gonna be honest with you, I did the homework before I watched the movie, because obviously all of the marketing was very much Rogue One, like from the director of and all that, so I thought, oh, well, you know, I'll do Star Wars, that makes sense. Really wish I did Blade Runner instead. That seems like a much better fit here.
Thematically, yes.
Yeah, but regardless, I did Return of the Jedi.
Actually, just on this subject, since you brought it up, the creator is better than Blade Runner. Don't at me. All right, on you go, David.
Haven't seen Blade Runner yet. Can't make a comment. But yeah, no, it's Return of the Jedi. I don't really know what all I'm supposed to say on it. In terms of where I think it stands in the Star Wars pantheon, it's less than Empire, and arguably I'm going to say it's worse than New Hope as well. It's low. It's not by far any one of my favorite films in that. And that's not to say that, like, it doesn't have any redeeming qualities. I think most of the Luke stuff, along with Vader, very well done. It does a good job at that. But I gotta say, what kept distracting me the entire time is it is so obvious how done with this Harrison Ford is. Like, he doesn't even feel like Han Solo in this. He feels like guy showing up for paycheck. So yeah, no, I mean, it obviously has its flaws. I'm not against Ewoks. I think that they're fine as is, but I just think that the general tone of it feels so far removed and so much more kidified that we're not playing with these larger ideas of themes and of like, oh, what does it mean to take responsibility for this? And what does it mean to, like, you know, come back from the dark side and whatnot? It feels a lot more like the themes are Luke Skywalker's a hero and there's good in everybody, except for the Emperor, who is pure evil, and there's no moral grayness at all to that. So all in all, I think I'd probably end up giving Return of the Jedi like an 8. It's not a bad movie, but it's definitely, like, out of the original trilogy, the lowest without a doubt.
Yeah, I don't even think it's arguable that it's worse than the first Star Wars.
Yeah,
I think that's the best of the three. But I mean, I think for me, I can feel them, like, it feels smaller in scope than the other two. You can tell the budget was a bit lower because they spend a lot of time in the forest to try and save money. Obviously, there's still a lot of good special effects for the time, but it's definitely a bit more limited feeling. I do think the Luke and Darth Vader stuff is typically very good in that movie. It's the highlight of it. But yeah, it kind of just felt like they were trying to find stuff for Han and Leia to do a lot of that movie.
Right. Yeah, that was the thing, is that there was a point where Luke was joining them on the mission, and then as the mission continues, he's like, I have to go do something else. And I was like, you're not even trying to hide that you don't want to be part of this plot. You're just saying it outright.
Yep. So, all right. Well, there we go, everyone. That's the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Who knows what homework David will do next week, but we'll find out then. So thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.